After graduating from Officers Candidate School, he was commissioned as an aviation officer and assigned as a pilot of the Army's state-of-the-art AH-1G Cobra helicopter. After finishing flight school, he was deployed with the 101st Airborne Division to Vietnam, where he served as aircraft commander and team leader. He flew extensively in Lam Son 719, Vietnam, and Laos. He accumulated more than 1,000 attack helicopter combat flying hours. The AH-1G Cobra helicopter flown by our guest is now on display at the Stephen F. Udvar Hazy Center Annex of the Smithsonian National Air and Space Museum at Washington Dulles International Airport. His career continued after his military, and he's still involved with the veterans and their cares and their needs through organizations such as the American Legion and the Military Officers Association. During his career, our speaker was recognized with the following awards for gallantry, meritorious service, Silver Star, Distinguished Flying Cross with Oak Leaf Cluster, Legion of Merit, Meritorious Service Medal, the Bronze Star, Army Commendation Medal, 3 awards, and the Army Achievement Medal, the Vietnam Gallantry Cross with the Silver Star. Will you please welcome Lieutenant Alan D. Skip Butler.
Thank you. I'd like to thank Doug for inviting me to be with you today, but I especially like to thank him for inviting me to talk about anything I felt like talking about. Nobody'd ever gone that far out on a limb with me before, and it made me chuckle a little bit. I did get some guidance from one of your Post 31 members today, and they said, you need to tell us a little bit about yourself that is not part of the headlines. And I really appreciate those words. I enlisted in the Army over in Florence.
I can't hear you.
I guess I recognize that voice. I enlisted in the Army over in Florence in 1967. For those of you that go that far back, you remember that Vietnam was kind of commanding the headlines in those days. And we knew this as soon as we raised our right hand where we would be going. There was no doubt. I enlisted in the Army to go to OCS, but as with most things in the Army, rules change, contracts change, events happen. And as I was headed through my basic and AIT, I understood that OCS had been canceled unless you either had a college degree or 1 year in the service. And I only had 2.5 years of college and had just barely gotten in, so no OCS for me. But they decided that the Army did need armored personnel carrier drivers. I didn't want much to do with tanks. But I was getting the first cousin to a tank up in Fort Knox, and that's where 39 of us went. And we trained, and after that I found myself on orders for Germany without my new bride. When you don't have a lot of rank, you don't have a lot of pull, and we all know that. So Private Butler was on his way to Germany, and as I was standing there in the 21st replacement to find out where I'd be going, there was a guy with a sign leaned up against the bumper of his Buick, and it said, "Sign up for airborne here." And I thought, why not? I've never done that. So I asked for permission to go over and talk to the guy, and it was given to me, and I did, and within an hour I was on orders to the 509th Airborne Brigade in Mainz. Never heard of Mainz either. Robert E. Lee Barracks in Mainz was the 8th Infantry Division's Airborne Brigade. And I was going in there as what was called a leg, non-airborne qualified. They called you a leg. And it wasn't real pleasant because they used other adjectives with that. So you just had to suffer through it until you could go to jump school. Well, I did go to jump school, but it wasn't for 2 months in that unit as a leg. And then in February, it's still pretty chilly in Germany. But we did, and I graduated, and they had a little deal where if you finished pretty high in your class, and there were 2 of us, I got selected as the honor graduate. So not only was I going to get my new jump pay every month, I was going to get a promotion to Spec 4. Another $55 a month, doubled. I was rolling in it. It's amazing what you go through and what you remember. And I apologize for not seeing back here. When I left Germany, finally, I got that OCS class date, and it was the good old Fort Benning, Georgia. All the infantry guys in here call it Fort Beginning, because that's where you start, that's where you visit, that's where you go a lot of the time as an infantry guy. As luck would have it, if you placed in the top 3 of your OCS class, you were allowed to pick your next assignment. And that's what I did, and that's when I wanted to be a Green Beret. I mean, after all, the song was out. And you just had to go try that. So I said, why not? So once you get there, you start getting all these other challenges that are really fun things to do, like rappelling out of helicopters instead of jumping out of them. And I even applied for and was sent to the Army's Underwater Swimmers Course, commonly known as Scuba School. And then I did drops into Camp Pickett, Virginia, Tooele, Utah, Pueblo, Arizona. We were always dropping in unannounced, and you had to stay there for a while. And then I was on orders to Vietnam. Finally came down. You can't avoid it forever. So the orders came down, and they said, you're going to be going over as a Green Beret with the 5th Special Forces Group in the Trang. So that was just fait accompli to me. I had to do that. That was my orders. That is until my wife's uncle came to visit us. And he said, she tells me you've got your orders to Vietnam. You're going as a Green Beret. That's pretty stupid. And as much as I wanted to agree with him, I found it hard. But he said, I'm a helicopter pilot. You need to be a helicopter pilot. I'm listening. But it was just listening until they finally explained to us that while you go to flight school, they pay you a temporary duty pay. You get $25 a day tax-free in addition to your officer's pay and your flight pay. Well, my wife and I had built up quite a little debt this far in our military career, and it was great to get that under a belt and get that over with. 4 months at Fort Walters, Texas, in primary helicopter school, 4 months down at Fort Rucker, Alabama, finally home. And then they had another little opportunity. If you finished high enough in your class, you got to pick an aircraft that you might want to fly instead of the Huey. So I picked Cobras. I mean, I wanted to shoot back if I gotta go. I mean, that's only natural, isn't it? I've met 3 other helicopter pilots in this room, and I enjoy talking to all of them. We got a real warrior sitting here today. This guy flew in the Persian Gulf, and he shot the screws out of that ship that was laying mines in the Persian Gulf. glad to see my good friend Steve Chilton here with us today. I get choked up when I think about that mission. I'll get to this later, but I'm sitting in the Pentagon listening to this as it went down for real over in the Persian Gulf. Anyway, we're going through the motions of Colbert School. Claudia and I get over to Savannah, Georgia, Hunter Army Airfield, and I get 7 hours in the aircraft under my belt, and I find out that I have the mumps. They shut the place down. They locked the gate. Nobody got in or nobody got out. For 2 days, I was the only guy that had the mumps. So they opened everything back up. Bad news for me, I'm gonna have to go on to Vietnam as a Huey guy, and I can't shoot back. So I called every friend I know, and I finally finagled a way to finish Cobra School before I went over. And I might be using all your time up. So I'm traipsing into Vietnam wearing my dress greens. Nobody told me. It's hot. And we're in this big long building. The chairs and tables are lined up, and we're processing in like most of you have done before. And a little kid looks up at me and he says, "Sir, you're a Cobra pilot. We need you guys everywhere. Where do you want to go?" And I hadn't thought about it. I didn't know how to get a chance or a choice. And I said, "Well, I don't know where they are, but I want to go to the 101st Airborne Division." And the room got quiet. People are looking and craning their heads, and I don't know why. And this fellow, this warrant officer, walks up behind me and he puts his hand on my shoulder and he says, "I think you and I are the only two guys here that know what they want. I'm going with you." It became a great friend of mine, Jim Vick. Anyway, I go to the 101st, and I was very pleased that I went there. That's a great unit. We did things right. I'm proud of my year there. I would not trade a thing, except maybe one of the 3 times I got shot down there. But I didn't shed any blood for my country, but a lot of sweat, because it was warm. When we got orders, I might mention too that I'm very proud of those awards you mentioned. I have 5 awards for valor, and I'm very pleased with that. I love the way they impact those to you. You know, they just show up and give them to you. That's not bad. And out of my 43 awards of the Air Medal, 2 of them are with a V device, and I'm very pleased to get that. Well, it's time now to go back to the U.S., and I find out I'm going back to Special Forces, right back to Fort Bragg. My wife and I are familiar with Fort Bragg, only now I'm going back as a captain and not a lieutenant. I can take charge of that place. And I tried, but it didn't work. So I'm reporting in, and now I'm going to get my ground time. I'm going to be walking on the ground as a Green Beret like I'm supposed to do. And I'm signing in there, and the guy says, no, we need pilots out at the airfield. You'll be going out to Simmons Army Airfield, and you'll be flying for Special Forces Aviation. So you'll be wearing your beret. Isn't that enough? Well, at that time, we're supposed to tag the bag. We're supposed to be in our basic branch, go to your other basic branch. Only then they changed that too, but that's not worth the story. I loved Fort Bragg. I got used to things at Fort Bragg just in time for 2 years later. We're now going to the Infantry Officers Advanced Course back to Fort Benning, Georgia, where they're going to train me now to be a company commander and a battalion staff officer. I played golf the whole 9 months. And a quick story there is I was getting my mail 6 weeks after I'd been there, and I had a 98 point something average and was 85th in my class. So I said, to heck with this. I'm going to play golf. And I didn't study anymore, but I listened in class, and still finished 85th in my class. The Army's got a way of leveling the field. They just level things out for you. As long as you participate with the right attitude, the military takes care of you. You just do your job. Remember when we all got married, took a wife, took responsibility wherever you were? When things came up, you just handled them. You just took care of it. You didn't go to your safe place. You didn't sit in the corner. You just handled it. You took care of it. And that's what we're supposed to do as adults, I think. So after the advanced course, my wife and I go to I've been to the 8th Infantry Division, now I've been to the 101st Airborne Division, and now I'm going to the 1st Cavalry Division in Fort Hood, Texas. And I don't recommend that either. Fort Hood allowed me to become a company commander, mechanized infantry company commander. I was a battalion staff officer, and it taught me a lot of things. And I'm not going to dwell on Fort Hood because a lot of you have probably already been there and spent that misery in your life. But next stop for Claudia and I was Germany. I got to go back to an aviation unit. I was a platoon leader, an XO, and an ops officer in this unit. And as I got promoted to major, they finally let me command it. I had 37 helicopters as a brand new major, and I do like this every time because I was a young major. I could get in those things and go anywhere I wanted in Germany. I could go to France, Switzerland, Belgium, just because I wanted to. What a freedom. And as long as you're training your troops over there, and Claudia will tell you, and the women in that unit thank me a lot, I took those guys to the field every single month for no reason other than I was going to train them. And that's what we did. We did battle drill, shooting tanks. We were the major tank killing power of Europe in those days. Because out of those 37 helicopters, I had 21 Cobras. Each of them carried 8 tow missiles. And my pilots were supposed to be able to hit with 7 out of those 8. And I'm convinced they could do it. Even I could do it, which was strange. We loved our time in Germany. When it was time to come back, they had to give my wife a sedative to get her on that jet. She loved it over there. And we go back as often as we can to visit and do other things over there and see people. But Germany is a great assignment. For those of you that have had it, I'm happy for you. And I'm sure you loved it. I know one of your members, Walter Bennett, loves it. And he'll go back in a minute. Let's see, I wanted to finish with it. As I was getting ready to leave Germany, they said I had to take one of the 3 R's. Recruiting, ROTC, or reserves. Well, I didn't know anything about any of it except ROTC because I'd been introduced to that over here in Florence State, now called UNA. And I was pretty determined that that's the one I wanted. And a major got himself in trouble down at Auburn. And when there was no room for me in ROTC anywhere close, when he got himself in trouble, that was my job. So I got his slot. Auburn was a great assignment. I was involuntarily extended there an extra year, so didn't spend 3, I spent 4. Talked the university into buying 2 helicopters. We're going to teach part of flight school for Fort Rucker. And that went almost nowhere. A 4-star did fly in. He said, I'm going to approve this, only I don't want the school to have to buy these aircraft. He looked to Major General Bobby Maddox from Fort Rucker and he said, Bobby, I don't want the school to have to buy these. I want you to bail them to them. My boss didn't know what bailment meant. And I start smiling. And then he also says, when it comes time for that maintenance thing for you guys to y'all do in aviation, he said, I don't want this school to have to worry about that either. I want them to just fly them down there to you and you give them 2 new ones. Well, you couldn't ask for better than that. So that went very well. About the time Claudia and I were thinking they were going to leave us at ROTC, I got a call from the Pentagon from a warrant officer who said, Major, you've been selected to come to the Pentagon. I said, oh no, I've avoided that place my whole life. Everybody that I know that knows anything says don't go there. And he said, well, you've been selected and you're going to have to go. And I made my excuses, and I finally ended up what turned out to be hanging up on the guy. 1 hour later, I get a call from a major this time. And he says, you know, you're going to have to quit fighting this. It's going to happen. You're going to come to the Pentagon. Oh, no, I don't. I've got to go. I got to go teach a class. Little white one. Didn't hurt too bad. I did that afternoon. So then I get a call. I have to run down the hallway. I speak to my colonel. And he says, you know, I've been to the Pentagon. I've been in Desk Ops. That's where they want you to go. That's a real feather in your cap. You need to go there. You're going to get a call from a Colonel Hickey in a minute, and he's going to tell you what's what. He said, I recommend you tell him yes, sir. So he called, and the first thing out of his mouth was, Major, it ought to be getting clear to even you about now that you are coming to the building. And even though I thought that was the greatest thing that ever happened to me. I spent 6 years running the aviation desk for all special operations aircraft. That meant when Delta and the SEAL teams are hauled to war and picked up, it's a special operations bird that does it. And that's where my friend Steve Chilton flew, in the 160th Special Ops Aviation Regiment. And they were my guys, and I took care of them from my fur-lined foxhole up in the Pentagon. Because I had more money than you could shake a stick at. And if it met any one of any 7 different criteria, like putting more steel on target, improving navigation accuracy, fuel endurance, more ammo, I could spend money on it. And I had $167 million a year, and this is in 1985. We built some aircraft, and the kids got the best you could have. It was nothing too good for those guys, because they're the first to fight. Somebody rings the bell, they're the first ones to go. I could tell about a 6-hour story about the night we deployed them to the Persian Gulf, but I will not do that today, because you got business you got to do. The Pentagon was the greatest thing that happened to my family. It taught me how money works, how you go to get money when you don't think you got any, and how nobody can really say no to the first to fight soldiers we have. You just go and do it. It is the old permission versus forgiveness thing. Today is Veterans Day. 11th hour, 11th day, 11th month, we've all heard that, and that's today, the 11th day. It's observed annually on this day and is a tribute to military veterans who have served in the U.S. Armed Services. Not to be confused with Memorial Day, which honors those who died while in service. Some of us, I always had to read that very slowly, because as the calendar runs and as you get older, things tend to cloud up for you. Veterans Day honors all military veterans, including those who are still with us. It is a day set aside to thank and honor all who served honorably in wartime and in peacetime. Some people get a little confused with that too. In wartime and in peacetime. If you look at the numbers, there are 19.5 million veterans living in the United States. 9 million of those are over 65 years of age. 5.6 million are drawing a disability from the VA. 2 million is the number of female veterans of those 5 million that are drawing a VA pension. 500,000, by the way, is the number of World War II veterans we still have alive. And that was of August this year. And unfortunately, we're losing those every year. California has the biggest number of veterans, 1.5 million. Texas is next with 1.4 million. I'll bet a lot of you, like I, didn't sign up, didn't raise my right arm to be a veteran. We were going to be a soldier, sailor, airman, Marine. We didn't think about being a veteran. That's just something that came with the territory later on. As a private, I know I didn't worry about being a veteran. I knew as I was returning from Vietnam, I was a combat veteran. That's the first time I really thought about veteran anything. I know when I was young, my mother was a lifetime veteran of Post 11 over in Florence. She was in the Navy in Washington, D.C. My dad was in the Army in the Philippines. But we didn't really talk about it at our house, and I don't know why. As I was finishing my military career, and I went through my retirement, you always get a physical as you get out. And I want to talk about the thing that I am most partisan about, emphatic about. I want you to know what I know now, and as the VA. I didn't know a lot about the VA until I took a cruise ship in the Baltic Sea, and my wife and I are steaming our way towards St. Petersburg, Russia, and we go to happy hour one evening. It's up in the top of the ship, big windows all around, and there's a big round bar up there, and she was seated at the bar, and I was standing behind her, and I looked across the bar and I saw a guy wearing the most obnoxious purple shirt with LSU on it that I've ever seen. So I kind of did like this to him, and I got his attention. I said, were they all sold out of Alabama stuff? You had to settle for that old thing? Around the bar he comes. And his wife is gathering up her purse. She's coming with him. And we've been friends to this day. And he said to me, we talked just a brief time, and he said, well, I guess you're 100%. I said, you mean the VA? He said, yeah, no, I'm 10%. He said, I know from what you've done, you should be rated a lot higher than that. And let me tell you how I know. I've spent 34 years with the VA in claims and awards. My wife here has spent 30, and I know what I'm talking about. Anybody who has done what you've done, you need to come and see me. He said, what was your 10% for? I said, sinusitis. He said, sleep apnea. I know you have it. You wake up during the night, you snore a lot, wake up your spouse. Yeah. He said, you need to come and see me. In fact, come spend the night with me, and the next morning we'll get up and we'll fill out your papers, because I know how to get your medical records. I'll have them when you get there. And he did, and this man helped me a great deal. And now I try to pay it forward, so to speak. I want all of you guys to go see your VSO. I don't care if they're tired of seeing you. I want you to go back and get them to help you fill out things from your medical file that you are authorized to draw. And you can see me after this if you want to. I've got some cards, I'll pass them out. I do not work for the VA, although there's a lot of people that know me now that think I should. When I was talking to this guy on board the ship in the very beginning, he said, I know you're one of them officer types. You think if you take this money, you're gonna take it out of some private's mouth. He said, I can assure you, any money you take from the VA is not gonna cost any person a penny. That money is appropriated for the veteran. Not purple veterans, not green veterans, the veteran. So you need to go see your VSO. Well, after I spent the time with him, I started learning how to do that. And the VA dollars that they send you, guys, are tax-free. It's a real help when you're paying bills and doing things and got grandkids, whatever you got. So get down to see your VSO or call me and I'll come drive you. You need to do that. The term veteran means a person who served in the active military, naval, or air service and was discharged or released therefrom under conditions other than dishonorable. If you got a retirement under any condition other than dishonorable, you can go to the VA. A minimum service requirement exists. Must have served a minimum of 24 months of active duty to be considered a veteran. There may be somebody sitting out here today who says, darn, I meet that requirement. I may need to go. If you do, please come and see me. I think it's very important that you do this for your family. If you don't need the money, then take the money and donate it to your favorite university. You can do something with the funds. Build a scholarship fund for somebody. But go and do that. There's a lot of guys in this room that I've seen at funerals, unfortunately, around the area. And I know they know how to pay it forward. And some people may not know who's qualified to have a military funeral. Under this public law, 10665, it requires that every eligible veteran receive a military funeral honors ceremony. And that is with the flag, the burial flag, folded and presented to the next of kin. And what I didn't know was that a funeral detail can be 2 people in uniform as long as they're play taps for you. Now, the guys that do this all the time might want to add something to that, but that's the way I understand it. Upon the family's request, that public law requires that they have a military funeral. I'm going to close with this. Veterans, you have done your duty. You have honorably served our nation with great distinction, and you can never say it enough. For your service in war and in peace, thank you and God bless all of you for being here. God bless our veterans, and God bless America.